Good morning and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce, giving you another update on the Ukraine war. And goodness me, a lot has happened. I'm going to give you two quotes. One is from Ernest Hemingway. How did you go bankrupt? Two ways. Gradually, then suddenly. Does this reflect what is going on with Russia at the moment in their front lines and their potential loss of this war going forward? How did it happen? Gradually, and then suddenly. And there's a similar quote which goes something like, war is a place where nothing happens for 6 days, and then everything happens all at once. And this has kind of been what's been going on in this campaign, certainly this war, certainly for the last sort of month, which is like loads of stuff happens, you quieten down a bit, then loads of stuff happens and you quieten down a bit. So loads of stuff is happening right now. Okay, let's get into it. Let's go to our map of the whole of Ukraine, and we're going to be concentrating as ever up at the sort of northeastern corner of Ukraine and the Oskil River. And things are happening from Kupiansk all the way down to, well, we're not really dealing with Liman anymore, it's Kreminna and Svatove. And I told you how Svatove would be a really big stepping stone, important objective towards going towards Starobilsk. And I just think as a logistics hub, Starobilsk is definitely going to be on the cards. Question is, are they going to try and circle Kreminna and these cities, or are they going to take Starobilsk, or are they going to try and do both? It depends how many forces they have. I was saying that really, in my opinion, and I don't know anything, of course, I'd be going for Starobilsk as a logistical hub that supports the rest of the front line further down south, and it means that the Russians would have to go around the side and come through Luhansk, the city of Luhansk, and further south from there through Donetsk, because Starobilsk controls this railway line down from sort of Russia, Belgorod region up here. Okay, so there's lots has been happening around here. Let's have a closer look. So this is the war map, and we have Borovar, which was holding out, is now liberated, and we have, here's a little bit of proof that it has been liberated. So, Ukrainian troops driving into Borovar, all that kind of stuff. Again, I did an extra video yesterday talking about claims and evidence. Here we have, people supporting the Ukrainians. It is an actual liberation rather than an occupation. This is their own land. Okay, so Borovar has been liberated, and we have what's going on between sort of Kreminna and Svatove, and then up further north to Kupiansk. So let me just show you that on the map. So here is Kupiansk up here. This is the terrain map on Google. So it just shows you sort of a slight more about the sort of contours and the general natural geography. So we have Kreminna, and then going on to Rubizhne, Serodonetsk, and Lysychansk. We have Starobilsk over here, which I think will be the next objective after Svatove. Svatove is looking in trouble. In fact, the Russians have asked that over the next 72 hours, people get out of Svatove, particularly those collaborating with the Russian forces and government. So that tells you that they're not looking to keep Svatove. Okay, we have Borovar over here. We have Kupiansk over here. So what has been happening? Well, yesterday we got to this position where around Kupiansk, the Ukrainians have made some gains, and then they hit down south along this road, encircled a village that had a bunch of military police in, and moved up to Kuzanivska. That there was some resistance, and they kind of stopped around there. Borovar was still with the Russians, and you had this kind of general front line up to Kreminna, but there's another river here going up here, and this formed part of the front line for the Russians. It's called a boggy river. There's another river going down here, where there are also settlements along here, and I think the P66 highway coming from Svatove down to Kreminna. And then what's happened just now is that, we have this situation where the Ukrainians are kind of stopped around here, but the Russians have pulled out of Borovar and rushed back to Svatove. putting in a bit of a defensive line here. Meanwhile, from Terny down here, the Ukrainians have pushed forth just north of Kreminna, and they are sort of probing and attacking around here, and they've taken a bit of a bridgehead and are fighting over this town, which is Krasnoyarzysk. Probably butchered that, sorry. And so they've got a bridgehead to the east of the river that comes down here and east of the highway. So that is a really useful position to take. So just to give you an idea, this is looking not on a relief map. Sometimes I actually prefer just the normal sort of 2D map that gives you a very clear picture. It's a bit clearer and less busy. So I've switched to that. So this, but what I'm doing is I'm focusing on basically this rectangle here. Okay, Svatove, Borovar, Kreminna, and over there. Okay, so here is that map. So we have Kreminna down here, we have Borovar there, and we have Svatove just here. And this is the situation. So what's the front line now? Well, Borovar has now been liberated. So basically, they're fighting over this town just here, which is Ryhorodka. Ryhorodka is where the extent of the Ukrainian front line is right now. There's fighting in that village town, and we come down here. They have liberated Makivka. We come down here, and then we have Terny. From there, they are launching attacks just north. I've only put one arrow in here because they've taken this bridgehead here, Krasnoyarzysk. But they are also attacking to the north of Kreminna as well. So there are now what the Ukrainians are doing, and they've learned that basically they didn't take Liman by taking it head on; they took it by surrounding it. So instead of hitting Kreminna front on here, they are looking to surround it. Okay, so rather than hit it straight here, they are going north and trying to encircle it, one would imagine, so that if they are going to succeed in taking all of these the towns, cities, they will succeed because they don't have the forces to overcome them in a frontal assault. They will succeed by doing what they did in Liman, encircling them and hoping that the Russians will run away. Now, my assumption would be that these are far better defended than Liman will be because they are also interconnected. So it's much more difficult. I mean, you could get away, I think, with encircling Kreminna, but encircling all of these three is much more difficult because they're basically one big conurbation. And so you would need much greater forces to do that. And then we're wondering about where these mobilized troops are going to come in and how they are going to support the Russian front lines. So this is a push both towards Svatove from up north in Kupiansk and also from sort of the Borovar, the troops in the northern part of this Ukrainian section, but also it's a move to the north of Kreminna. It is all happening. Lots going on this front line. Okay, so that is a really quick summary of what is going on in the Kreminna Svatove area. I'll move on to Kherson now. Okay, let's take a larger look at the area. Well, actually, if we look at the Google Maps area, we've got Mykolaiv, we've got Kherson down here, and we have this whole region that has been the subject of attritional warfare for now a good few weeks. And there's this Davidi Breed front, little salient there, and there's been this northern salient and concentration down south, but that hasn't really moved a lot. That's been, proper attritional. Now, if you remember from the other day, yesterday, there was this really quick attack that the Ukrainians did, and they went 20 kilometers in a day, and they only stopped because it was sort of nighttime, and they marched all the way down here, and they right to Ducheny. So why did they stop at Ducheny? Well, it turns out the Russians blew up a bridge, sort of dam bridge. Now, this is all so this river, the Dnipro River, was dammed here in Novokhovka, and that provides fresh water down, by the way, to Crimea. So this is super, super important here. But it has also meant that this is all a sort of artificial lake in a sense, or at least a flooded area. In Dushani, there's almost, it's not quite an estuary because it's not a river, but it's a little culvert that's been sort of filled up, or not little. I mean, it's substantial enough, but there's a bridge over it, sort of dam bridge thing, and that's been blown up by the Russians, and that's forced the Ukrainians pretty much to stop there. And in fact, rather than what this map says is slightly out of date, it appears that from here, the Ukrainians actually have control, or there's a front line that goes actually right across there. Okay. So we look at that front line. This is a front line here. This is taken from a War in Ukraine, an excellent channel that everyone should follow. And he talks about how in the Dvidi area there are three sort of regiments that were defending here, and the Ukrainians have found it really difficult to force a breakthrough, apart from their initial sort of bridgehead that they formed. But because the Russians suffered so badly here, and they were brought right back to Ducheny and then blew up the bridge, they have provided one regiment of these three, an artillery division, over to support them, the 76th Artillery Division, a regiment of theirs. So this has now held up this area. The question is, will that now mean that the Dvidi Breed is weaker? And can the Ukrainians take advantage, a bit of opportunism there, to create a breakthrough in Dvidi Breed? That's where the front lines are at the moment. And then rather than force themselves around here, it looks like the Ukrainians are looking for the weakest spot to continue their advance. Now, what's interesting about this situation is that the smaller this whole region is, that is filled with 20 to 25,000 Russian troops, the more concentrated those troops become, and the smaller the area, the easier it is for the Ukrainians to target everywhere, right? So imagine, let's have a little look back at a map here, and I'll try and explain what I mean. Now, this is a really rough map of the Kherson region as I've been sort of describing it. Now, the red line, imagine that was the lines a few days ago, okay? And you've got artillery attacks hitting the Russian lines behind it. Now, the artillery are going to be placed some way back from the front line, and they'll then be able to hit some way behind the front lines. Maybe, I don't know, if you've got short range artillery sort of there. It means that this general area is protected and everyone is fairly spread out, right? But now if you've pushed people back to this blue line and they can't really escape, so this is all about the fact that they can't really get out of there because of all the supply lines and bridges and ferries have been blown up, then you are packing these in like sardines into a tin, right? And your artillery is now here. And basically, all of this is now potential victim to artillery fire. So the larger the front line, the more spread out the troops are, the less stuff that artillery can generally hit. The more compact you are, the squashed in you are, the more dangerous each artillery barrage is going to be because you're all packed in closer, so it's easier to hit more targets. But also, you are just able to hit further in because you are shrinking this region. So you will have artillery that's able to be placed here, all the way around here, and you'll be able to hit pretty much everywhere. So this is just not looking good. Each successive day, the Russians are going to be panicking more and more and thinking there ain't no way out of this. Okay, now yesterday I talked to you about, during this quick attack here, there was evidence on social media of the Russians saying, literally announcing on social media, where is our air support? Please get us some air support. So this then prompted a load of derision about the Russian forces. That, oh my goodness, they're even announcing, they're so desperate, they're announcing on social media. That's ridiculous. And then some people say, oh, it's because they're conscripts, they don't know what they're doing. And other people are like, it's this, it's that. Well, actually, there's some interesting theories as to why that took place. Okay, so, and this is from Trent Telenko, well worth following on Twitter, obviously. If this translation is to be believed, Ukraine jammed Russian communications in support of its northern Kherson offensive. This would explain the scale of the Ukrainian breakthrough. No comms means no bombs. In other words, if the Russians had their communications jammed, they literally couldn't contact their HQ to say, we need air support, please get us air support now, we are in trouble. And they couldn't even communicate with their HQ to say, we are in trouble. In other words, no air support came because they just didn't know what was going on because the Ukrainians had successfully jammed their communications. So they then go onto social media to say, get us some air support. Okay, this starts making a lot more sense. Russian forward observers could not reach their guns, and rear HQ didn't hear collapsing frontline Russian units' calls for help until the Ukrainian mobile forces were well into the Russian rear areas. Then the Russian reserves could not hear their directions to counterattack in time to do anything useful. The Russians now have a case of the slows in Kherson until they figure out tactics to limit Ukrainian radio jamming effectiveness. Russian forces won't have time to do so during this Ukrainian operation. I think getting some popcorn is in order. That's fascinating stuff. Okay, so and that makes way more sense than the Russians just being a bit rubbish and announcing stuff on social media. It's like all their communications were jammed around here. They were then hit. They had weak forces because they'd done some force rotation. They were taken back to Duchenne, and they couldn't tell their HQ to get their air support in there and to get artillery defense to hit the Ukrainians because their communications were jammed. And it all happened so quickly. And now we're at where we're at, that they've had to then support these troops with a more experienced artillery division to give them a little bit more bite around here. But it's just generally not looking good. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense of the front lines. Just to give you the stuck record position, not a lot has changed on the Zaporizhzhia front line, and not a lot has changed in the Donetsk and up to the Luhansk front lines. The Russians continue to hit their heads against a brick wall, attacking in New York, attacking in Bakhmut, and all these areas. And you're thinking, why are you bothering to do that? You're wasting time and effort and resources. You should be supporting. The part of the problem up here in the Svatove area is that I said that all these people were military police up here. Well, it turns out that these forces are generally Luhansk militia forces. There doesn't seem to be any regular Russian military forces around here. And so the troop quality is really poor. I mean, there are some reinforcements coming in here, but again, Luhansk militia reinforcements, not quality troops. So if you're in Svatove at the moment, you're thinking, wow, everyone around here is not the top quality troops that we see down in Kherson. Some of those naval infantry brigades, these are poor quality troops, and the reinforcements are poor quality troops. What are the chances that Svatove is going to last? Not good chances. Let's get out to Starobilsk. So I'd imagine as the Russians are advising, people are getting out of Svatove, collaborators are getting out and running away because, this is not going to last long. Because the quality is poor. Okay, what other nuggets can I tell you? Here's by the way, the ISW map, but the ISW seems to be just a little bit slower at the moment, off the mark. But there is some, you can see that they are making those little inroads just north of Kreminna. So there you go. That's the ISW map. Here's just another map of the area if you like maps with pretty pictures on. But this is fairly decent. You can see the different sort of movements of Ukrainian troops, both down from Kupiansk, up from Terny, really, up there. Also putting pressure on Kreminna, but I don't think they're putting direct pressure. I think it's more about encircling, and stuff's going on. As all the time, they are hitting lines of communication, GLOCs, lines of communication, and strategic targets such as depots, ammunition depots, transport hubs, and all those kind of things. Right. Okay, what nuggets can I give you? Here's a really interesting bit of analysis. This is by Ragnar Gudmundsson. Well worth looking at. It does an analysis of troop losses. And look at this over the last, is 7-day average that he uses, but this is since March. And you can see the troop losses now. So this would be during the Kharkiv lightning offensive, and also down in Kherson. A little bit of and then it sort of dipped back down, and then we've gone. This is Liman, and the last few days. So if you average that out, it looks pretty bad for the Russians. Things are not good. And in fact, if you go and look at his websites, datastudio.google.com, and then you can have a look at go and find him on Twitter, and then find his link. You can see how well they're doing in comparison. There's just heaps of data. I haven't got time to talk about it, but just lots of data, and you can see what's going on. If you love your data, 7-day averages, change between days, accumulated losses. Obviously, he's getting, I think, most of this from the Ukrainians themselves, so take that data with a pinch of salt too. But it's certainly really good data presentation. What else can we say? Okay, Russia is economically in trouble. So Bloomberg, Russia privately warns of deep and prolonged economic damage. So this is internal data coming from within Russia that has kind of got leaked out, that they are in trouble. The economic prospects for Russia are very, very poor. So the sanctions are beginning to bite, and renewed sanctions from the EU and US as a result of the annexation will continue to cause problems for the Russians. Okay, so yesterday another Su-25 jet was shot down. We had several Ka-52 helicopters, I think, shot down. Or Ka-52, depending on who you listen to. Here's a first-person account. Just thought you could have a bit of a rave there. So you've got several helicopters in the air there, and that was a Stinger. It certainly looked like a Stinger. It might have been another one. There are several going on there. The UK Martlet that's being used. Yeah, it's that's low-flying Ka-52 helicopters. 2 of them there, one of them getting hit. And that's again, when we see things like that, it's not so much the loss of the helicopter. That is bad, obviously, for the Russians, but it's the loss of the experienced pilots that will be on board. There'll be more than one. That you can't just replace them. They take years of training, and if 2 or more pilots are taken out, then that's a massive loss for the Russians. That is, I just thought I'd share that with you. This is really worth spending a couple of minutes on. So if you've got the time, I'm going to play a little bit of this for you, because this is a massively interesting insight into the opinions of certain Russian people. Tonight on Russian state TV, the mood is grim. This is not tonight. This was sort of last night, maybe the night before. Look at their faces. Dmitry Sabelin, deputy chairman of the Defense Committee, admits that Russia desperately needs to stop and regroup, and is experiencing all sorts of shortages compared to Ukraine that has it all and then some. So this is a really honest realization that the whole world is against Russia. Fascinating, this.
Знаете, вот война против России, она никогда не прекращалась. В 90-х годах, когда мы были оккупированы, когда у нас развязывали войну на Кавказе, когда у нас взрывали дома в Москве, мы просто народу своим сказать тогда не могли. Когда мы начали приобретать уже свой суверенитет потихонечку, война перенеслась на территорию Украины. И перенеслась она не за Украину, а против России и Запада. По столкновению. Мы же понимаем прекрасно, что большинство жителей Украины – это русские люди. И мы старались всегда идти поиграть по правилам. Мы же помним выборы Верховную Раду в 2006 году. Мы помним выборы президента. Я не буду говорить о качестве президента. Я просто говорю, что тогда выборы были за Россию. И люди, которые выиграли эти выборы легитимно, это все люди были за Россию. Все хотят мира. Но мы должны понимать, что сейчас война идет не за эти 4 области, или даже не за другие области России. Война идет за Россию. И здесь на карту ставится вообще быть нам или не быть нам. Поэтому я убежден, что мы в любом случае победим. У нас нет других вариантов.
Что для этого надо сделать?
А надо перестраивать все.
This is absolutely fascinating. So, and he's quite right in a way. This really is a proxy war between the West and Russia. Like I have no qualms in admitting that. This is NATO thinking this is the best opportunity that we'll ever have of taking out Russia without confronting them ourselves with NATO troops and the NATO countries themselves doing that job. So Ukraine is being used as a proxy, as well as the fact that this is also defending Ukraine's sovereignty and doing the right moral thing. There is all sorts going on here, and this is Russia. So he's feeling that there's an existential threat to Russia, and actually he's quite right. If Russia loses, and I can't, and I've long said this, and I could show you an article I wrote 6 months ago saying that there's no way Putin can win. Right, there is just no way he can win. Like they will lose, but at what cost for the whole world? But at what cost for Russia? So there will be an existential shift in what Russia is in the eventuality of them losing. If Putin is deposed, or there's a coup or a revolution or whatever, Russia is changing. Will have to change, and it's just fascinating to see, how this will come about.
А надо перестраивать все. Надо перестраивать, бесспорно, нашу промышленность. Мы должны понимать, что нам никто помогать не будет. У нас нету и не будет союзников, кроме нашей армии и флота. И перестраивать промышленность.
This is a really common trope that I think it comes from like 100 years ago, which is we have no allies other than our navy and army. But this is true. They just have no allies. No one's their friends. Even China are being very standoffish, and India, and more so as the months go by. But this is interesting. We need to restructure our industry to become self-sufficient. We can't rely. We're being sanctioned by everyone. We have to make everything ourselves. We have to mine everything ourselves. We have to become self-sufficient and just change the entire way our economy goes. It's looking very much like getting back to the command economy of state communism.
Чтобы быть самодостаточными, чтобы обеспечить необходимым наши вооруженные силы. Не должна армия испытывать недостатка в боеприпасах, в снарядах, в минах. И я абсолютно согласен, мы воюем сейчас не с Украиной. Там техника, вооружение 55 стран. Прежде чем сказать, что они поставят, это уже давно все там есть. Уже завезли, сказали и так далее. Поэтому там помощь, я думаю, значительно больше.
It's fascinating again. This is a mission that they are experiencing lack of equipment. But this is an open admission that the Russians don't have enough equipment. And they can't get it to their frontline troops. They just don't. And he's admitting that. And he's also saying, and this is absolutely true, that NATO, when they announce that they are, or any country announce that they are providing a bunch of tanks or missiles or rocket systems to Ukraine, they announce it after they have already been delivered, which is quite a clever way of doing it. So Russians don't have time to react. They're already being used.
По крайней мере, вот если взять, я могу сказать точно, на фронте, на линии боевого соприкосновения в Донецкой Народной Республике, там практически вся иностранщина. Там все есть. РЛС, КББ, Цезари, Крабы, Три семерки и так далее. Различные виды РСЗО, различные, не только Химарсы, там другие есть. И все иностранное. И они не имеют недостатков абсолютно в боеприпасах, не имеют недостатков в ракетах, не имеют недостатков в ничем. Поэтому вопрос, в какой...
So for all the bravado of these guys, I mean, he's not saying that we're bad and etc., but he's like being realistic in his like nationalism. This guy, he's saying they've got everything, they can supply everything to the Ukrainians, and we've got shortages, and we need to sort that out. If we don't sort that out, we're in trouble, and we will win, and we should win because hey, that's my national pride. But we need to change things up.
В какой срок мы можем это перестроить? И мы обязаны это перестроить. На это, да, бесспорно, уйдет время. Мы должны реально понимать, что невозможно вот так вот перестроить промышленность. Нужно развернуть новое оборудование, новые цеха, нужно обучить людей, нужно завести комплектующие или начать. Но мы обязаны это сделать. Нужно перестраивать в том числе, я считаю, журналистику. Мы должны вводить цензуру, не бояться этого. Бесспорно.
Again, God, this is so fascinating. Like he's advocating returning to complete authoritarian rule and basically, state control over everything, state control over the press, which they already have anyway. I mean, they've got rid of all the free press over the last 7 months. There's basically no free press. But he's now very publicly advocating this, and he said, and we shouldn't be afraid of that.
Должна быть свобода и так далее, все понятно. Но мы должны понимать, что мы сейчас находимся в достаточно жестком времени. Бесспорно, нужно и перестраивать и систему управления войсками. Это тоже надо перестраивать. Мы сейчас видим все недостатки, и всегда о том, что происходит, надо откровенно говорить, откровенно делать выводы для того, чтобы победить. Вот какие вещи. Исходя из этих...
Which is fascinating. So we shouldn't be afraid to admit this. We should be free to say X, Y, and Z, but we should also completely censor the press. Let's admit that we're going through hard times. We need to restructure, but also censor anyone that says things like that.
Мы понимаем, что должны быть сроки определенные. Не надо стесняться. Мы должны перейти, если понимаем, что у нас не хватает ресурсов, мы должны перейти к жесткой обороне. Надо закопаться, заминироваться. Мы должны дать возможность хорошо подготовиться нашему мобилизационному ресурсу, резерву, который сейчас проходит мобилизацию. Мы обязательно должны сделать так, чтобы он грамотно и правильно вводился в боевые действия. То есть, чтобы распределялся по воинским частям правильно. Чтобы они не должны идти сразу на передовую и вступать сходу в бой, бесспорно. Они должны только вступать тогда, когда будут готовы, подготовлены. Хотя и сегодня, я могу сказать, честь и хвала нашей армии, вот честь и хвала, потому что везде, где она воюет, противник имеет 3-5-кратное превосходство. Это только в живой силе. Про технику я вообще не говорю.
This is not strictly true. They're not outnumbered, the Russians. However, he's absolutely right that they're being sent without training. And then he's going to go on and talk about military equipment. I mean, you can go and find that. Always worth checking out Julia Davis, who translates the Russian state TV, Russian Media Monitor. Check her out on Twitter. I won't play that anymore because this will go on for ages. But honestly, that's one of the most fascinating monologues I've seen from a Russian ever. So there's a saying, it's all the P's, isn't it? Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And the Russians annexed these 4 regions, and they didn't even know where the borders for the regions were. And they were like, "These are our regions. These are Russian people." Yeah, what are the borders? We don't know. Have you done a successful, ballot of this population if you don't know where the borders are? Absolutely ridiculous. Kremlin says Russia will consult with local populations of 2 Ukraine regions that Moscow annexed last week to determine exact borders of regions to be integrated into Russia. Unbelievable. But there you go. There's been a bit of a sea change. This is Phillips O'Brien looking at a BBC News article, which is fascinating. Interesting change is happening in the European discourse about helping Ukraine. Months ago, there was the old canard of when will Europe lose interest? Thankfully, that's gone. Now, with Ukraine winning, the language is don't be left behind. France have been under the cosh the last few days because France have not been that forthcoming with military aid, and then suddenly they're producing a bunch of armored vehicles today, 20 of their, is it Bastion armored vehicles? What's happening is people are shaming other nations. So instead of losing interest, what's happening is like, well, we're still providing loads. What are you doing? And then certain nations are looking around and thinking, well, actually, in the public sphere, we're looking a bit rubbish. So we better up. It's all about virtue signaling in a way. It's really interesting, these kind of virtue signaling of different nations, but virtue signaling that has actual like meat to it. It's not just signaling your virtue, but it's then putting your money where your mouth is. And France have been caught out here and now are producing a bunch of stuff. And this is an interesting shift. So it's not like, oh, we're forgetting especially in times of a recession and cost of living crisis, we're not forgetting Ukraine. We're actually arguing about who's not doing enough. I've talked before about how the railway army that the Russians are have really struggled with the whole war, and they went into this war with only 4,000 trucks when the Americans have an equivalent of 100,000. And the Ukrainians took out their rail hubs at the beginning of the war, and so they couldn't use the railways to begin with, and they had to use loads of trucks, and the trucks were poorly maintained, broke down, got stuck in the mud. The Rapudstitsa, the famous spring mud and autumn mud, so that mud is coming back, and the Russians don't have enough trucks. And I showed you pictures of them providing trucks that were just massively out of date. And when you see on, say, Ukraine Weapons Tracker, just pictures, here are 4 trucks captured in usable condition, reasonable condition, for 4 Ural and Kamaz trucks. That is 4 trucks that the Russians now don't have. And you think that every day they should be bringing munitions and supplies to their troops. Every day these trucks should be being used, backs and forwards, backs and forwards, backs and forwards. So those trucks can no longer be used every day. Just that picture there is 4 trucks not being able to supply Russian troops. Not just once, but every single day. So just that picture is indicative of a logistical nightmare that the Russians are in. Okay, I showed you a picture of an Iranian drone, one of the bigger ones, not the kamikaze ones. This is a bigger drone, a bit like the Bayraktar, their equivalent, that fell out the sky in the Black Sea and was towed back in the Black Sea in the water. Fell out the sky, probably due to electronic warfare and it being jammed. Now this is very useful because they tow this back for a very good reason, which is like, let's have a look at the tech that's on board, see if this is useful, see if we can copy it. The Americans will be all over this, right? And probably the Turkish should be all over this with their Bayraktar manufacturers. And this, I presume, can then be used. So this is the Moja 6 drone that fell out the sky in relatively good condition. We can see how the drone, the unmanned aerial vehicle, was armed. It was still carrying at least one Iranian Grem 5 guided bomb with a TV seeker and an HEAS warhead, presumably high explosive anti-structure with 8.5 kilogram of explosives. So that was set off a missile warhead that can hit a building. And there it is. So in this condition, the UAV and PGMs attached are ripe for exploitation. So this is a key. They've now got a decent missile that they can look at. It's in perfect working order, right? So it's not been. So usually a missile is shot at a building and explodes, and you can't make head or tail of what that missile was, how it was constructed, and technology on board. Now they've got both the drone and these missiles. This is an absolute winner for the Ukrainian and their allies. Very quickly, this is what war is like. This gave me a bit of a jump when I saw it. I was like, oh. So these are some Ukrainian troops checking out another truck here. Supply truck. Your man gets inside. Just speed it on a bit. Having a look. Gets in. Then he hears, oh, that's artillery. You see, oh, there's artillery there, guys. Not sure we should be hanging out here. Let's get back in. Came from over there. Let's
Отъезжаем, отходим, парни, отходим.
get back in the Humvee. American provided Humvee.
Впереди 6 едет.
Get out of here, get out of here.
Давай, заднюю, 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 давай. В сторону, в сторону. Уй.
And there it ends. I jumped again. As I watched that, I jumped again. Yeah, so that is war. And that door, looked pretty much unable to be closed afterwards. So last thing I'm going to say, anyway, that's just a little insight into war. Last 2 things I'm going to say. This is from Defmon. This is what I've been saying myself. He's saying, look at the way, if you guys have not noticed, sorry if I'm Captain Obvious, that this is what the Ukrainians seem to be doing. They envelop a town, trying to force a retreat, and every time Russia retreats, they lose equipment and personnel. So rather than taking places head on, what they've done every single time is surround a place, the Russians run away, and they take all the equipment they leave behind. And this is what they've been repeatedly doing, and that's exactly what I'm saying is going to happen probably in Kreminna, but will be much more difficult with these other places. But Svatove, I'm sure that'll happen, which is don't take them head on, encircle them, and then the Russians run away. Okay, last thing to say is Elon Musk. Elon Musk is being an absolute grade A plonker. So Elon Musk is just a weird guy anyway. You might say he's a genius in some ways, but and this is an interesting thing because he's been really supportive of the Ukrainians. He's basically given them the use of his Starlink satellite and given them heaps of technology and really helped the Ukrainians. And he was a big hero for the Ukrainians in terms of the support. But now he's gone off the deep end. So on Twitter, last few days, he's been saying stuff that's really annoyed the Ukrainians, which is Ukraine-Russia peace. I think we should redo the elections of the annexed regions under UN supervision. Russia leaves if this is the will of the people. Crimea, formerly part of Russia, as it has been since 1783 until Khrushchev's mistake. So he's now saying Crimea is part of Russia and Khrushchev made a mistake in giving it to Ukraine. He's saying the water supply to Crimea should be assured and Ukraine should remain neutral. And he's asked for a poll on this. So I said no, but the poll is 60% saying no and 40% yes. I mean, that's going to be Russians and people like Elon Musk. So this has really annoyed the Ukrainians. And he's trying to this is highly likely to be the outcome in the end. Just a question of how, jacking off, just asking questions. For how many are going to die before then. Also worth noting that a possible, albeit unlikely, outcome from this conflict is nuclear war. Please vote in this poll. Let's try this then. The will of the people who live in the Donbass and Crimea should decide whether they're part of Russia or Ukraine. So he's just trying to, Russia is doing partial mobilization. They go to full war mobilization if Crimea is at risk. Death on both sides will be devastating. Russia has more than 3 times the population of Ukraine, so victory for Ukraine is unlikely in total war. If you care about the people of Ukraine, seek peace. This has really annoyed the Ukrainians. And the Russians, Dmitry Medvedev, has praised Elon Musk, right? And you're like, well, if the Russia Security Council Deputy Chair has praised Elon Musk, then Elon Musk is probably saying the wrong thing here. And Zelensky, just brilliant. He's done his own poll. Which Elon Musk do you like more? The one who supports Ukraine or the one who supports Russia? Turns out that 80% say it's the one who supports Ukraine. So it's not that Elon Musk is pushing for peace necessarily. Yes, we should be pushing for peace, but then it's not about making concessions to Russia. These are the guys that have invaded Ukraine and taken their sovereign territory. And so Ukraine are well within their rights to say, no, we're not giving them Russia. We're not remaining neutral, and we're not giving them back Crimea that they just took off us after a sham referendum in 2014. No, that's not what's happening. So this has really, really annoyed the Ukrainians, and rightly so. Anyway, that's been a really long one today. So much happening, and I've got so much more I could say, and I've actually cut it short from a bunch of stuff I was going to say. Thank you so much for being a part of this and for supporting. Please like, subscribe, share. Put all your comments down below. I am reading lots of them, but you're having some lively discussions, and thanks for all your support and nice things that you say. And Toodle Pips, I'll speak to you tomorrow.